I learned to cook pretty young due to some family issues. By elementary school, I was making basic meals for myself. I'm not some fancy chef, I just cook home-style food without expensive ingredients, enough to feed everyone at the table. Over the years, I picked up techniques from watching others cook, reading cookbooks, and generally trying to improve. When I met my girlfriend in college, I discovered she couldn't cook at all. I didn't think much of it at first. She was smart, pursuing her doctorate in psychology, and had simply grown up in an environment where cooking wasn't taught. But as our relationship got serious, it became a problem. I was juggling a full undergraduate STEM program while working a full-time job, easily putting in 20 more hours a week than she did with her doctoral program and work-study position. Despite this, I found myself cooking dinner for us every single night during breaks. Eventually, I suggested what I thought was a fair compromise. I told her that I would cook twice for every time she cooked. This meant she would cook twice a week, I would cook 4 times, and we would eat out once. She reluctantly agreed, but those first few weeks were frustrating. Every night it was her turn to cook, we mysteriously ended up ordering takeout. Since we shared our finances, this didn't seem fair to me. I confronted her about our agreement, telling her that I was already doing most of the housework and shopping, and I felt like I was being taken advantage of. She responded with frustration, saying that she would cook the following night. The next evening, I stayed in the kitchen, offering to help if needed. What happened next caught me completely off guard. She stood in the middle of the kitchen, looking lost. Finally, she burst into tears. I asked her what was wrong and what had happened. Through her tears, she explained that she was going to make mac and cheese and hot dogs, but admitted that she didn't know how to boil hot dogs. I was confused and told her that she could just put them in boiling water for a few minutes. She then confessed that she didn't even know how to boil water. I had to fight back my initial reaction, which was somewhere between shock and laughter. Here was a brilliant woman in her mid-20s pursuing a doctorate who had never boiled water. I reassured her that it was okay and offered to show her. I explained the simple process of putting water in a pot, placing it on the stove, turning on the heat, and waiting until bubbles formed. She watched intently as I demonstrated this basic cooking step. That night we had mac and cheese and hot dogs for dinner. It wasn't great, but it was a start. Or so I thought. For the next 4 years, yes, 4 years, every time it was her turn to cook, we had the exact same meal. Mac and cheese and boiled hot dogs. She never progressed beyond this single recipe. Despite my gentle encouragement, I would occasionally ask if she'd like to try cooking something different that week. She would always respond that she'd be happy to, but then claim she was really in the mood for hot dogs and mac and cheese, suggesting maybe next week would be better for trying something new. Next week never came. My friends started making jokes about it. They called it dirty hot dog water and would ask me how many other uses she had found for it. One friend jokingly suggested that she could make dirty hot dog water soup or perhaps dirty hot dog water cocktails. One Christmas, my friend even gave us matching dirty hot dog water t-shirts. I was mortified, but thankfully she didn't understand the joke. One of these friends eventually dropped out of school to pursue stand-up comedy and became quite successful, landing a job as a writer for a popular TV show. Whenever he came back to town, his act would inevitably include dirty hot dog water jokes. Some of these jokes even made it onto the national program he wrote for. When he returned for a headline show at the local comedy club, he got us prime seats right up front. Our whole friend group was there, including my girlfriend. To my horror, his entire routine that night centered around dirty hot dog water. Our table roared with laughter while the rest of the audience sat in uncomfortable silence before they started booing. My girlfriend was the only one at our table who didn't get it, looking around in confusion. I dismissed her confusion by telling her it was nothing, just an inside joke. Eventually, we broke up for various reasons, but I sometimes wonder if she ever expanded her culinary skills beyond mac and cheese and hot dogs. Years later, I discovered that what we were really wasting wasn't the hot dog water, but the pasta water. Instead of throwing it out after cooking noodles, you can use it in sauces and other recipes to add thickness and flavor. If only I'd known that back then. At least something useful could have come from those 4 years of the same meal. I'd had a long day at work, the kind where your boss dumps 3 emergency projects on you at 4:30 p.m. and expects them all finished before you leave. I was exhausted and just wanted to get home, maybe order some takeout, and collapse on my couch with a good show. The train was surprisingly empty for a Tuesday evening. I found a comfortable window seat and settled in for the 40-minute ride home. I put in my earbuds, turned on my favorite playlist, and closed my eyes, trying to forget the stress of the day. 20 minutes into the journey, the train stopped at a station, and that's when my peaceful evening took a turn for the worse. A woman stumbled onto the train pulling a boy who looked about 10 years old by the hand. She was swaying slightly, and I immediately noticed a strong smell of alcohol when they passed by me. The woman had bleached blonde hair styled in that typical "can I speak to the manager" haircut, and the boy was wearing a private school uniform that had seen better days. They made quite the entrance, laughing loudly and looking around the train car like they were judging everyone in it. The woman's eyes swept across the seats as if she was inspecting a hotel room she'd paid too much for. To my dismay, they chose the seats directly across from me. The woman flopped down with an exaggerated sigh while the boy bounced on his seat, kicking his legs against the chair in front of him. I tried to focus on my music, but they were talking so loudly that I could hear them clearly even through my earbuds. I reluctantly took them out, figuring I should at least be aware of what was happening around me. The woman reached into her oversized purse and pulled out what looked like a small paper bag. She opened it, revealing several fireworks of different sizes. The woman excitedly showed the boy what she had brought for them, telling him that the fireworks were going to be so much fun. The boy responded with enthusiasm, asking if they could light them right away. I couldn't believe my ears when the woman said she didn't see why not, complaining that it had been such a boring day. She suggested they light one of the fireworks because it would be fun. The boy agreed eagerly, adding that it would be cool and everyone would see them. Was she seriously considering lighting fireworks on a moving train? Before I could even process what was happening, the woman had pulled out a lighter, lit one of the smaller fireworks, and the boy had thrown it out the window. I watched in horror as the sparks flew by outside. My heart was pounding. What they were doing wasn't just annoying, it was dangerous and illegal. The boy was practically jumping in his seat now, clearly excited by what they'd done. He begged his mother repeatedly to let him light another one, pleading with increasing desperation. The woman giggled and hiccuped, swaying slightly in her seat. She replied that she supposed one more wouldn't hurt. She told him he was such a good boy and deserved some fun. She handed him another firework, slightly larger than the first one, along with her lighter. I knew I should say something, but before I could open my mouth, the boy had already lit the fuse. That's when disaster struck. The boy fumbled with a lit firework. Instead of holding it out the window as planned, he dropped it on the floor of the train. The fireworks started sparking immediately, sending colorful sparks across the floor and under the seats. Everyone around us jumped to their feet, screaming and pushing to get away. The smoke detector went off and the emergency lights started flashing. Within seconds, the small firework had ignited a discarded newspaper on the floor, and flames began to spread. I was frozen in shock, watching as chaos unfolded around me. The train conductor's voice came over the intercom announcing that the emergency brakes were being applied and ordering everyone to move to the front cars. The woman and boy remained in their seats, the woman looking mildly annoyed at the commotion while the boy stared wide-eyed at the growing fire. The woman complained loudly, telling everyone to stop overreacting. She dismissed the situation as just a tiny firework and criticized people these days for not being able to take a joke. People were shoving past each other to get away from the smoke. An elderly man fell in the aisle, and I snapped out of my shock to help him up and guide him toward the exit. By the time we reached the next car, the train had come to a screeching halt. Through the windows, I could see we had stopped at a station platform. The train doors opened and everyone rushed out. Emergency services must have been called immediately because police cars and a fire truck were already pulling up outside. Firefighters boarded the train while police officers began taking statements from passengers on the platform. I explained what I had seen, pointing out the woman and boy who were now being escorted off the train. The woman was arguing loudly with the officers, gesturing wildly. The woman was shouting that the situation was ridiculous and that they were just having a bit of fun. She demanded to know if the officers had any idea who her husband was, claiming he played golf with the chief of police. The boy told his mother he was scared, his voice small and trembling. The woman harshly told him to shut up, blaming him by saying it was all his fault for dropping the firework. I watched as the police officer's expression hardened at her words. He pulled out handcuffs and began reading the woman her rights, while another officer gently led the boy aside to speak with him. The fire wasn't as bad as it could have been. The quick action of the train staff had prevented it from spreading beyond one section of our car, but the damage was still significant, and the delay affected hundreds of commuters. As they put the woman in the back of a police car, I overheard one officer telling another that they'd found more fireworks in her purse, along with an open bottle of vodka. The boy was being taken to stay with his grandparents, while his mother faced charges of public intoxication, child endangerment, and destruction of public property. I finally made it home 3 hours later than planned. As I unlocked my door, my phone buzzed with a news alert. The incident had already made the local news, complete with a mugshot of the woman looking considerably less entitled with mascara streaking down her face. The next morning I received a call from the police asking if I would be willing to testify about what I had witnessed. I agreed without hesitation. Some people need to learn that their fun doesn't trump everyone else's safety, and I was more than happy to help make that lesson stick. High school was never easy for me. I wasn't the most popular kid, but I wasn't totally invisible either. I just kind of existed in that middle ground where teachers either liked you or forgot about you. I was okay with that balance until our science department went through some major changes. Our school was facing budget cuts, and suddenly teachers were getting laid off left and right. Nobody really explained why, just typical administrative stuff that students aren't supposed to question. My favorite science teacher, who had always encouraged my interest in biology, was one of the casualties. The replacement teacher arrived mid-semester. Let's call her Karen. At first, Karen seemed cool. She had this energetic vibe and promised to make science interesting. But within a week, I noticed something odd. She definitely had favorites, and I definitely wasn't one of them. The first red flag was when I complimented her lesson on cellular respiration. I told her that I found her explanation of the Krebs cycle interesting and that I'd never thought about it that way before. She barely looked up from her desk and just mumbled that I should make sure to take good notes for the test. Yet when one of the popular girls said almost the same thing later, telling Karen that she loved how she explained the process that day, Karen's response was completely different. She thanked the girl warmly, called her sweetie, and even offered to share some extra reading materials with her if she wanted. The bathroom situation was even worse. If I raised my hand during class and asked to use the bathroom, Karen would tell me no, that I needed to sit down and pay attention to class, and that I should go between periods. But when others asked the same question, Karen would smile and tell them, "Sure, sweetie, just don't be too long." I tried not to let it bother me. Maybe I was just being sensitive. That changed when she assigned our major project for the semester, a comprehensive reading and summary of a scientific text that would be worth half our grade. She made it very clear this was our chance to show our dedication, effort, writing skills, and comprehension. I saw this as my opportunity to prove myself. I picked a challenging book on evolutionary biology, read it cover to cover, and spent weeks crafting what I genuinely believed was the best academic work I'd ever produced. I created visuals, cited multiple sources, and even connected concepts to our previous lessons. I was proud of what I'd created. When the day came to return our graded projects, the classroom was buzzing with excitement. Students were high-fiving each other and showing off their A-plus grades. I sat confidently, waiting for my name to be called. Karen asked if we could talk privately. My stomach dropped immediately. We stepped into the hallway, and she handed me my paper with a big red D scrawled across the top. I asked her what was wrong with my essay and if there was anything I could do better. Her response was harsh. She told me my writing was trash and that if I couldn't write well, I should go back to elementary school. She claimed my paragraphs didn't match. I just told her I understood, though inside I was seething. I wanted to argue. I wanted to ask for specific examples. I wanted to point out all the effort I put in. But I just nodded, apologized, and walked away with my supposedly terrible paper clutched in my hand. On the bus ride home, a thought occurred to me. My former science teacher had always praised my writing. What if I asked for a second opinion? I still had his email, so I scanned my paper and sent it to him, asking for honest feedback. He responded the next day. Not only did he think my paper was excellent, but he also said it was college-level work that showed exceptional understanding of the material. No writing errors, no paragraph issues, nothing but praise for what he called a straight A job. Now I was furious. This wasn't about me being sensitive. Karen had deliberately given me an unfair grade. And if she was doing this to me, she was probably doing it to others too. That evening I showed everything to my father. The paper, the grade, and the feedback from my former teacher. Dad's face turned redder than the D on my paper. My father told me that this was completely unacceptable and that he would be calling the school tomorrow. He scheduled a meeting with the principal, the department head, and Karen. I wasn't allowed in the meeting room, but I waited outside. Even through the closed door I could hear my father's voice rising occasionally. At one point I heard my father asking Karen what she had to say about calling his son's writing trash. The silence that followed was deafening. I couldn't hear Karen's response, but whatever she said clearly didn't satisfy anyone. The meeting lasted just over an hour. When the door finally opened, Karen stormed out, shooting me a look of pure hatred as she passed. The principal asked to speak with me briefly. She apologized for my experience and assured me that my grade would be reconsidered by the department head. She didn't explicitly mention any consequences for Karen, but her tight-lipped expression told me something was happening. 2 days later, a substitute teacher walked into our science class. By the end of the week, a notice went out that we would have a new permanent teacher starting the following Monday. Karen was gone. Later, my dad filled me in on what had happened in that meeting. Apparently, Karen couldn't justify her grading when asked to point out specific flaws in my paper. When pressed, she made vague comments about my attitude and classroom participation. The department head had then pulled a sample of other graded papers and found a clear pattern. Certain students consistently received higher marks for objectively similar or even lower quality work. The final nail in her coffin was when my former teacher's assessment was shared with the group. Faced with a professional contradiction of her grading and unable to defend calling a student's work trash, Karen had finally shown her true colors by lashing out at everyone in the room. As it turned out, there had already been parent complaints about her favoritism, but mine was the first with concrete evidence. She wasn't just fired for how she treated me. I was simply the case that couldn't be ignored any longer. Sometimes, as Sun Tzu said, the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. I never had to confront Karen directly. I just had to show the truth of what was happening, and she defeated herself with her own behavior. When our new teacher started the following week, the first thing she did was announce that everyone would have the opportunity to resubmit their projects if they felt their grades didn't reflect their work. Several students took her up on the offer. I got my A, but more importantly, I learned that standing up against unfairness isn't just about protecting yourself. It's about making sure others don't face the same treatment.